Hello everyone, welcome back to Simplify. Have you heard of the Fear and Greed Index? Do you know anything about this index? It's an interesting topic, and it's one that has been made famous by a quote that Warren Buffett offered. And he said, "When others are greedy, be fearful, and when others are fearful, be greedy." Now, this was general guidance that pertained to his view of the market and investments. We're going to talk a little bit about why the Fear and Greed Index was created, the components that go into this index. We'll also talk about a similar index that was created more recently for cryptocurrencies. These tools can be very useful, but it's important to know why they were created, the different factors that are incorporated into these tools, and then how to navigate the use of these tools in your day-to-day investing lives. One of the main factors that these tools tend to get at are the emotional and sentimental elements of investing. They're measuring the value of this emotion and sentiment amongst investors in the marketplace. This is the incorporation of emotions into investing. It's not all math and science and probabilities and technical factors. A lot of investing has to do with mental fortitude, thinking through problems, staying resilient when others are uneasy, and controlling your emotions. These indices are really geared at measuring the sentiment in the marketplace, and they allow people to get a quick snapshot of what seems to be the prevailing feeling around a certain time in the marketplace. This can be both useful and it could be harmful. It just depends on how you interpret the data and what you would like to do with it. So now I'm going to offer a brief history of each of these different index tools. I'll talk about the components that make up each of the tools, and then we can talk more generally about how I use these tools and how I think they might be helpful for you. So we'll start with the Fear and Greed Index. Now this index was created by CNN Business. It was created back in 2010. And again, I'll reiterate, the point here was to measure sentiment around marketplace. It was to look at the prevailing emotions that were dictating decision making in the marketplace, and then to add some sort of structure. Now each index we'll talk about today has a value from 0 to 100. I think the range for extreme greed is 70 to 100, then it's greed below that, and then neutral, and then it goes down from there. And so understanding these different values, and that they're generally just approximations of 7 different components that we'll talk about now, is helpful. Nothing here is exact or scientific per se, but there are ways of interpreting different metrics and providing a quantitative assessment. And so that's what this index attempts to do. Now the first component is stock price momentum. This is looking at the S&P 500, the general trend that's happening amongst these top 500 performing stocks. Is the momentum shifting upward? Is it shifting downward? Is it neutral? It's just looking at overall momentum. The second component is stock price strength. So it's looking at 52-week highs and lows for performing stocks. This is more of a quantitative measure. It's looking at the number of stocks hitting 52-week highs versus the number of stocks hitting 52-week lows. This is again calculated and provided as a quantitative measure. Now the stock price breadth factor is number 3. This is looking at the overall number of stocks and their trajectories. Are they advancing or are they declining? It's just looking at general trends. These 3 together are used to provide quantitative metrics around stocks. The fourth metric has to do with put and call options. Now don't worry if you don't know what put and call options are. In another video in the future, I'll go into more specifics about put and call options. But for now, they're simply just bets against certain positions. So if a particular person wants to bet that a stock is going to go down, they'll place a bet on that. If they think it's going to go up, they'll also place a bet on that, and they can take advantage of general trends in predicting where things are going to go. This is a very volatile way of investing, and it requires much more experience and skill to be successful. Nonetheless, it's an important part of the market, and it is a metric in the Fear and Greed Index. Now, the fifth factor has to do with general market volatility. This is when you see sudden increases or sudden decreases in overall market performance. This can be spurred on by events such as 9/11, for instance. It can be spurred on by decisions that are made, companies that report earnings that are either significantly higher or lower than expected. All sorts of things can cause volatility in the market. Generally, things are pretty stable. When extra volatility exists, this can be a sign of something else that's happening within the marketplace. Now, the next factor has to do with junk bond performance. Again, if you don't know what junk bonds are, let's just say for the purposes of this video that they tend to be more risky assets. Bonds that can potentially grow much faster and also can potentially lose value much faster. So this particular metric is looking at the demand for junk bonds. And because these bonds tend to be riskier in nature, it shows probably more of a greed element versus this next factor, which has to do with safe haven investment options. Safe haven options tend to be more associated with things like treasuries, something that is issued by the United States government, a bond, for instance, through a municipality, something that has a long track record of performing at a certain level. This is usually not where you make the highest yield on your money, but it is a safe place that you can go to keep your money from losing extended amounts of value. Gold is also potentially something here that is seen as a safe haven and a hold of value over time. So the composition of those 7 elements are put into an algorithm. On the other end of all of that computation is a number that's emitted, and this number is measured again from 0 to 100. Now, to give you some context, today, as we speak, in mid-December of 2024, we're sitting at a value of 50. So this is a very neutral value. The fear value is not extremely high and the greed value is not extremely high. We're right smack dab in the middle. Now, to look back a couple of months, let's go to October. In October, the greed index was actually quite high. And November, similarly, the greed index was prevailing. Only more recently did we drop down to this more neutral index. Now let's jump over to the Crypto Fear and Greed Index. This index was not created by CNN. It actually was created on a website called alternative.me. Similarly, there are 7 components that are also determining how this index rates. And the very first has to do with Bitcoin specifically. So it's looking at the price of Bitcoin and the momentum in Bitcoin. Are lots of investors rolling into Bitcoin? Are lots of investors rolling out of Bitcoin? It's looking at general trends and momentum of this particular asset. So the next factor has to do with the entire crypto market. It's looking at volume. It's looking at the volume of trades that are happening in the crypto market across the board. This includes Bitcoin, but also all of the different altcoins that exist. There are so many different coins. It's hard to keep track of, frankly. New coins come online often and old coins roll off. And so it's important to understand this is the entire picture that's being measured. Now, the third factor is where we start to see some differences between the different index tools. This factor on the crypto side is looking at social media and the sentiment in social media. So it's really more of an objective poll of information. It's trying to establish what the different sentiment values are across social media platforms. It's also looking at likely larger scale media platforms what's being written about crypto and what are people saying. Do people feel fearful? Are people feeling doubtful of their investments? Are they struggling? Or are they excited? Do they feel strongly about predictions upward in the future? The next factor has to do with surveys. So general surveys are conducted amongst the general population to basically understand what they feel about crypto markets. Again, it's a sample size of individuals and it's likely distributed across the general population, but it's looking at sentiment towards cryptocurrency in general. Now, the next factor is looking at Bitcoin dominance. Now, you might ask, what exactly does that mean and why does that matter? Well, if Bitcoin is growing in market cap while the alternative coins are losing market cap value, this is generally a sign that investors are retreating to an asset that is deemed to be more secure and a bit more stable. Bitcoin is the king in this space, and so this asset is often where investors go to keep their money safe and secure and slightly more stable over time. Alternatively, if you see money pooling into alternative coins, altcoins, this can indicate that greed is a bit higher and people are taking more risks on assets in order to grow their money faster and to have higher profits in the at least short term, potentially not the long term, I think, as evidence has shown. Now, the next factor has to do with Google search trends. It's just a look at what people are searching for in the crypto space. What are the different questions that are being asked? Are people generally feeling a bit insecure about their crypto investments? Or are they looking to learn how to invest in crypto, where they should be putting their money, the different altcoins that are coming onto the market? I think this is relatively easy to measure, but it's something that really looks at general emotion and sentiment again. Now, similar to the Fear and Greed Index, the Crypto Fear and Greed Index also has a measure for general market volatility. And so the final factor is just looking at the volatility of the crypto market space in general. It's looking at extreme fluctuations, highs and lows in short amounts of time. And then these trends are transferred into some sort of quantitative assessment, all composed with the additional 6 elements we just talked through to give you your index rating. Now, for comparison to the Fear and Greed Index for the marketplace, the stock marketplace, the crypto marketplace is in a state of extreme greed. If you've been watching the crypto market space at all, and in particular Bitcoin, you'll know that it reached and peaked over $100,000 per coin just a month or so ago. Now, this value has fluctuated on and off the $100,000 mark. I think as we speak, it's a little bit above $100,000. Just yesterday or the day before, it was around $94,000. So we are seeing some peaks and valleys here in this small range, but it also shows a tremendous amount of growth. People are continuing to pool their assets into this, and extreme greed is in the air according to this index.